Yo, what's checking, everybody? We're back. It's another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. Like this video if we say anything clever or funny or any of it. We want you to subscribe to the channel. We want you to hit that notifications button, ring that bell so that you're letting you know when we've got videos and stuff. We'll have more videos throughout the week. Just because it's a bye week doesn't mean that we won't have banger content. So make sure that you're here all week long. As a matter of fact, it's dangerous when we do this on War. We're giving grades to positions throughout today's offense, tomorrow's defense, or later in the week, I guess, is defense. And I used to get coaches so mad when I did grades. Coaches and players hate grades. This is a video that might get us in trouble with people, but we are a man of the people. And the people want us to keep it a buck, and the people want grades. They always want grades. So today, the focus, offensive side of the ball, not players, positions. What letter grade through 7 games, the unofficial midway point of the season, if you will, going into a bye week. And we start with the quarterback position. Because
hold on. When we start with the quarterback position, are we going overall, starting with Hudson?
Yes.
And Casey? So it's cumulative.
This isn't a Casey Thompson grade.
Okay, it's a quarterback.
This is a quarterback grade because we really would get our asses in trouble if we just started giving out grades to trust me. You know.
Yes.
You know. Like,
but by the way, what were those conversations with coaches like after you would hand out those grades after games? Because you stopped doing it after a while.
I stopped doing it because I didn't get the story didn't get enough page views to justify the anger that I would get from, and it's so subjective. And like, I don't know, man, when people hear D's and F's, it just freaks them out. Even when they know deep down they play D's and F's. I've had so many coaches over the years be like, why don't you come in here and look at the film? It's like, Coach, he fumbled 4 times. He threw 5 interceptions. He missed 9 tackles. Like, what did I really need to see that changed the spirit of the grade? So it's positions only. We start with quarterback. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. I have a grade in my head, and I've had it in my head since the very moment you and I talked about doing it. I have no other grades for no other positions yet in my head. I'll make it up as we go. But quarterback popped into my head immediately. I wonder where the floor is yours. Lead us off with quarterback. What grade would you give this very complicated there may not be another position more complicated to talk about than the quarterback position.
This is the tough one, right?
I know.
Because first of all, for me, A is off the table, right? I can't give an A grade because I can't ignore that Arkansas happened. You've got to factor that in. You've got to factor in Oklahoma State happened. You also have got to factor in some of the 3 and outs that occurred.
They've played 7 games. And in 3 of the 7 games, the quarterback position didn't play good enough. Didn't play good enough against Arkansas, clearly. And then Casey's had 2 games this year where you'd go, he needed to be better than that.
I'm going to go from a cumulative standpoint. I'm probably going to say B-.
Wow.
So I'm going to say borderline C.
Wow.
But I'm going to give it a plus in an area just because there were some really good games that happened, like Texas Tech happened, Rice happened, but okay, Louisiana happened. I mean, okay. I mean, I give them credit. Louisiana was ranked at the time, so I can't knock it. But there were and Oklahoma happened, so there's a plus performance there. But the knock, and I think what knocks down the grade for me a little bit, is the Arkansas game. And look, and Casey played well, but this is cumulative, right? So right. This is everybody, not just Casey per se. Because if it's Casey, I'd probably be in a more like a B plus-ish type of area. But I think the Arkansas happened, so I'd probably bring it down. So cumulative, I'll say B minus.
I've changed my grade in the last 2 minutes.
Okay.
Primarily because 3/7 is a big number. So, and you could argue the 3 biggest games on the schedule so far have been Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Arkansas. And in 2 of those 3 games, the position wasn't ranged from passable to, and just barely, to god awful. And I say passable because I thought Casey started well against Oklahoma State. Final 3 quarters weren't good. And then the Arkansas game. There's a part of me that wants to give an A minus, though, which is a total Casey vote. And it's the totality of almost half those games not being really good. And the Hudson Card performance in Arkansas drags it down to a B plus for me. It's a mid-season grade. Maybe I come down if Casey Thompson struggles more, but he's the number 1 rated quarterback in the Big 12. And full stop. If we'd said before the season started, you can know nothing else but Casey Thompson or whoever is the starting quarterback at Texas will lead the Big 12 in passing efficiency. You get no other details about his game, how he plays against certain teams. Would you take that? And Texas fans would have snapped your hand off to accept that deal. They just shook your hand. The last time that happened might have been Vince in 2005. So, yeah, you take that. So I have to give Casey Thompson, it's funny, I'm the Hudson Card fan club president, and I think people sometimes get it flipped when I do things like ask questions. I've asked questions of Casey, but what he's done so far is a bit underrated at this point. We've reached a point where I think what he's done for the totality of the season is being a bit underrated. Oh, by the way, he threw 5 touchdowns against Oklahoma. And if I said nothing else, again, if I had said going into the season, I'm not going to tell you anything else about the Oklahoma game. But Casey Thompson's going to throw for 388 and 5 touchdowns. You taking it? Yes. I'm not telling you if it's a win or a loss.
Yes.
I'm just telling you that your quarterback goes bonkers. And you go, well, wait a minute. Texas is going to have the best quarterback performance in 100+ years in the history of the rivalry. Any interceptions in there? You know what? Actually, I'll tell you. No. 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Again, before that person could finish this sentence, Texas fans would have shaken his hand and said, yes. So, I mean, I'm coming to Casey Thompson's defense a little bit here and just saying my grade might drop. My Casey Thompson grade's an A minus. The Arkansas performance as a whole takes it below an A because it feels like to give the position an A, Anwar. God, it feels like we're really relaxing our grades. If really any position outside of running back for this team gets an A when they're 4-3 and not in general being good enough. So if we move to the running back position.
So the overall grade, your overall grade is what?
A B plus.
B plus. Okay, gotcha.
I was at an A minus coming into it.
Okay.
And then we talked about, I think, a little more context, and it dropped me down to a B plus. Okay. But there are some elements of what Casey when Steve Sarkisian says yesterday that that Casey's got a little bit more street cred because of what he's accomplished. It might not be fair to Hudson Card, but that's not what this is about. But it's true. He now has that Oklahoma game in his hip pocket, and a guy like me can say, "Well, Hudson could have done this," but he didn't. He could have, maybe, but he didn't. And Casey did. And I think that it means something. It doesn't mean it gets a free pass forever, but it means in the current context of the conversation, I totally understand where Sarkisian is coming from to a certain extent. Running backs. This one to me is easy. This is easy.
Yeah.
It's A+.
Yeah.
Because it's not just Bijan, it's everybody.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I absolutely. It's really, it's A+. We don't even have to have the conversation, Ketch.
It can't be better, really.
Nah.
It's as good. The running back position for this team is contributing at a level that almost can't be improved unless you're like, go be an 11 out of 10, because they are producing at ridiculous numbers. This one's a little tricky. Wide receiver.
This is tough. This is a tough one.
Yeah, because you're going to give Xavier Worthy an A+, but the group as a whole is a little more difficult to pin down.
They are difficult because there have been some drops that have occurred, and like you said, Xavier standout. Jordan Whittington was pretty good, and I like his ability to catch balls in traffic, contested balls. I thought Jordan was excellent at doing that, going up and just grabbing it and getting it. So yeah, but then I feel like we're talking about two guys.
Well, hey, real quick, it has to be mentioned. Too many drop passes against Arkansas, too many drop passes against TCU. It's a little bit like the quarterbacks where there have been enough games where that position. This past weekend against Oklahoma State, they shut Xavier Worthy down. And outside of the big play to Marcus Washington, there wasn't anybody else over the course of 60 minutes contributing, in part because of the Jordan Whittington injury. Josh Moore has the really big game against Oklahoma, but doesn't have the same contributions the next week. So it's a little bit like the quarterbacks where, like, no matter what the numbers are, in almost half the games this year, we've come out of games saying, that position could have helped its quarterbacks a lot more than it did.
So even though this it's basically been Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, and then and technically Bijan Robinson, right? And I'm looking here. Joshua Moore is at 17 receptions for $169. Marcus Washington has 4 receptions. Calvante has 3. So I mean, really, Ketch, if we're grading it simply off of Jordan and Xavier, because that's really what the grade boils down to, because the other guys aren't really.
But we can't forget the other guys. The other guys are the reason why my grade is going to be what it is.
If it was Jordan and Xavier, it's probably A to A+. Where I got to go for a collective group, I'm probably all right. So I'm gonna bump quarterbacks up to back up to B, and I'm going to move receivers to B-.
Fair enough. It comes down to this. Xavier Worthy gets an A+. Jordan Whittington, for me, in the first 6 games of this season, borderline B+, borderline between B and B+, not B+ and A-. But he's on the upside of a B for me. He wasn't quite, I think, a player. I thought, and I think I'm grading Jordan a little harshly in that I came into this year thinking he could catch 100 passes and that his production rate wasn't that high. In part, the offense hasn't lended itself for him to be. I thought it might be a case where he would get that kind of volume, but it turned out that in some games, in the opener he did, but then, it felt like he and Xavier were trading big games every other week early in the season. So B+ for him. I will give Marcus Washington a B and Joshua Moore a B. I give Washington a B because he's a great blocker.
Yes.
And he plays 25% of the snaps, and he's basically like an H-back or a tight end in the sense that, they don't use him in line, but he blocks like he is. And he's the best blocker on the team, so he gets a B. even if he's only caught, I think, 4 passes all year. I'll give Joshua Moore a B-, actually. I have not seen out of Joshua Moore what I would have expected. And then everybody else is in the D for disappointment. Every other receiver on campus, the totality of that is I'll go B- as well. I'll go B-. You could talk me into a B because you could say more so than Casey Thompson throwing a great ball against TCU. Jordan Whittington made a couple of special plays that helped get that game over the top. And then Xavier Worthy against Oklahoma was otherworldly. And I think we've seen the receivers make some really big plays this season, that were more about the receivers making big plays than it was quarterback. Even the quarterback throw was 50% responsible. These guys have been really good catch and run. I wonder if our grade for the receiver position is going to be this high over the course of the rest of the season, because Xavier Worthy is going to have to do everything, it feels like. And I don't know from week to week outside of him who I can count on. So I'll go B-. I could listen to a B, but yeah, I find myself needing more out of this position than they've been able to give. And it's not necessarily about the top end guys. They don't have enough guys. That it's so funny, Anwar, we used to complain about the wide receiver rotations. Can they just play the best players? They've done that this year, right? We're not seeing these wonky wide receiver rotations where it's like it's 3rd and 8 and Jordan Whittington or Xavier Worthy's not on the field. But they do have to have more than 2 guys making plays. And that really, I thought the offense felt that on Saturday against Oklahoma State. You felt Jordan Whittington's absence because on a day when Xavier Worthy wasn't just going bonkers, they've had Whittington to pick up the slack previously this season, and that guy really didn't exist. With all due respect to Marcus Washington's deep pass, there just wasn't anything else beyond that. And it was a day when that was really needed if Texas wanted to win that game. This one's tough too, Anwar. Tight ends.
Oh.
They're not involved in the receiving game at all.
No, I mean, Cade Brewer leads the tight ends, and he's got 7 receptions for 57 yards. Jared Wiley has 4 for 28. And
I thought that group, Anwar, might catch 80 balls this year as a group. Yeah.
And Jatavian Sanders is not getting any run, over there. It's an odd group. So I mean, they're there for the blocking, but it's not there for the passing portion of it. It's really hard.
They're not great blockers either. They're okay.
Yeah.
But
this is kind of we'll get into a conversation that we'll have coming soon about like offensive line, because how much of what Bijan's doing is because of Bijan, and how much is they're creating holes, right?
You gave the running backs an A+, but the offensive line's not getting an A+.
No, we know that. I'd probably just give him a C. I mean, average. I don't see anything spectacular, out of it, and it's a little disappointing, Ketch, because I think you and I were huge Jared Wiley fans, and you and from the time that from recruiting to when Herman said this was a future NFL player to when we've seen flashes, we're like, man, Jared Wiley, but he hasn't really overtaken Cade Brewer. Cade Brewer still has a lock on that position. You don't look at the tight end position at all, Ketch, from a passing perspective and think, ooh, wow, they just got you with that guy. Yeah. It doesn't really happen. It's just, a couple of dinks and dunks here and there, and that's about it. So, from the blocking ability and helping out with Bijan, Roshan, and Keelan, I will give him a C, and I just knock him down just because from a pass catching standpoint, they're not involved, and they can say, well, their name is not being called a lot. Well, there's probably a reason why, and it's because Sarkisian feels like he has better options as far as pass catch is concerned. C for me.
I'm going to give them a higher grade, but I'm going to acknowledge that I may be wrong and that you may be right in giving them the lower grade. But here's where here's where I'm going to rely on a little bit of data that my eyeballs don't support. Okay. So this isn't me telling you what my eyeballs are telling me is happening, but this is what the data says.
Okay.
The two positions that the Longhorns use the most offensively from a schematic standpoint, they'll go 11 personnel and then they go 12 personnel.
Yes.
And I don't have Alex's numbers in front of me, but they go into 12 personnel a lot, 40% of the time on offense, maybe a little bit less than that, but it's a big part of what they do offensively. And this is an offense that's basically the best in the Big 12. So my eyeballs don't see them crushing it in the run game. My eyeballs don't tell me they're obviously not involved in the passing game at a large extent. But two of them are on the field 2 out of every 5 plays.
Mm-hmm. And
this is an offense having a lot of success. I mean, they're scoring over 40 points a game. I didn't look at the stats this week, but going into last week, Texas was the number 1 team in the Big 12 in scoring, in passing offense, in total offense, and in passing efficiency offense. And I will give them a B minus just because the data says they have a lot of success out of 12 personnel. It's one of the reasons why they run so much of it. As a team, we're not saying that the offense is terrible. So I'm going to give them a B, but my eyeballs don't tell me that. That's just me going, God, we're going to give the wide, it feels like we're giving some low grades for an offense that when you look in the stats is kicking ass, and it can't all be running back. So I don't feel good about it. I don't feel confident about it, but the 12 personnel thing makes me think that there are reason for success more than the naked eye tells us it's going to be, which leads us to the final grade on offense. And naked eye is a good way to talk about this, right? To the naked eye, this Texas offensive line isn't good, really. I mean, and they're okay. They're okay. But against superior, I don't know how to even frame it. They've gotten their ass kicked in a few games this year to the point that it's impacted the one loss side of the game. But yet we give the running backs an A+ and the quarterbacks either a B+ or an A-, right? So they're rushing and passing for a lot of yards. What do we do with this offensive line from a grade standpoint?
Well, first of all, before we grade, let's point out some numbers here, right? So we know this from a passing offense. We know there's a rushing offense, but two things. This offense is ranked 6th in tackles for losses allowed, so 6th in the Big 12, and they're ranked 9th in sacks allowed, which is we did a previous video which it says pretty much tied for last.
They're last. They're tied for last.
And they've allowed 16 sacks in the 7 games that they've played so far. So, so there is some stuff where we got to look at and say, yes. So when it comes to run blocking, it does help to have some Bijan, but Roschon's had some success. It does help to have some Bijan that's there. But when it comes to pass pro, it gets hazy. I mean, 16 sacks allowed is 16 sacks allowed. And you can go into, hey, maybe the quarterback held it too long. We get it. We understand football. We understand there's different aspects of it. Did the quarterback hold it too long? Absolutely. Did certain assignments were potentially missed, schematics, like all those stuff. We get that. So we understand. Before everyone starts bitching, oh, you guys don't know football. We get it. But from the eye test standpoint, it also has struggled. So
what if we do this? Let's break it into 2 and maybe merge them together. Let's start with pass blocking. What do you give the group? just for pass blocking?
Probably a C minus. Won't give him a D because there have been times where I feel like they have provided Casey with opportunities. Maybe he's missed a throw. Maybe a receiver's dropped the ball. But there's times that if the other guys had executed, I feel like we would have praised him a little bit more.
Before I give you my grade, do Louisiana, Rice, and Texas Tech really matter?
No, but I can't say that. I would say no, not for our grading purposes.
They're getting a D.
Okay.
Because against Oklahoma in the second half, couldn't block anybody. Stretches against TCU, certainly in the second half against Oklahoma State, and then the Arkansas game. I mean,
yeah.
They retired Hudson Card to some degree. I mean, Hudson helped retire himself, but they played a role in that. Like, they couldn't block. And that spooked their quarterback, and the whole thing fell apart. And D is for disappointing. And they can look. The good news is 5 games left. Change it. But the feeling right now is that group, the consensus, I think, amongst Texas fans, is that group is eventually going to get Casey Thompson hurt. And when people talk about Hudson Card and Casey, you'll hear a lot of people say, Hudson just needs to chill out. He's going to get a chance because that group's going to get Casey hurt and he's going to get a chance to play. And that's
he's already banged up. He's already banged up.
An indictment.
Yeah. He's already banged up right now, Ketch. He's got the hand. And I mean, he was down for a little bit of time against Oklahoma State where you're like, ooh, we were shocked that he came back in so quickly.
Yeah. So, man, I don't want to be a hater. I think I just proved with the tight ends that I'm sympathetic, I think, towards the things we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
But the things with the offensive line position that we can see, I don't need stats. I know that both Texas quarterbacks throughout the first 7 games of this season have lost confidence in themselves and what they're doing because they are apprehensive about what they're getting in pass protection. And, you can't have that. You could see last week that their inability to keep guys off of Casey was starting to impact him.
Yeah.
And, the passing game's going backwards at this point to some degree. Some of that's Jordan Whittington related, but, we're doing that thing now where we're talking about Casey Thompson's struggles because he's had a few recently. And it's like, well, how the hell do you even give him? How do you know what's going on with Casey when the offensive line in front of him is performing? We can't ignore that. Like that, right. We literally are talking about we can't properly grade the quarterbacks because how much can you even put on them given the protection in front of them? I'm okay with a C minus. If you said Ketch, no, I'd go, okay, C minus. But my real opinion, I think, is D. And it has nothing to do with the stats. It just has everything to do with the fact that group can't be trusted right now. And you know what? That is disappointing.
It is. And here's the deal. This is one of these things. We'll have more of a conversation about this and probably after the season. This is one of these things I look at, and that's a group that they inherited, right? And at that point, so I won't even knock Kyle Flood this year, nor will I try to judge him as a coach because we've seen this group struggle over the years. I mean, so to us, it's no surprise. The only surprise to us, Ketch, was that they didn't attack the transfer portal. But I will say this, Ketch, as hesitant as they were to attack the transfer portal this past off season to improve the offensive line, I think they need to be as much as they went to the linebackers, they've got to do that with offensive line because Ketch, when we talk about how long it takes an offensive lineman to develop, it's cool to go ahead and say build it through recruiting. but you're talking about 3 years from now, you know?
Yeah, because you have to do that development thing, which Texas hasn't been great at, but you can't cheat the process.
No. So when you've got to say, okay, you got to develop some guys. Okay, recruit them, bring them in. That's 3 years from now. You still got to find ways to win against Alabama next year. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so they've got to in the off season, got to say, all right, transfer portal time. The way Oklahoma attacked it is the way Texas has to attack it, and they've got to say, man, who's available? We're going after them. Throw the kitchen sink after them, because they're going to need a couple of guys. Because no matter what you may think about some of the super seniors, when those guys are gone, we don't know if what's behind them is much better, because if they were, they'd probably be playing right now.
Yeah. Anwar, they had scholarships available at the end this year. Like, I don't think you could, when we talk about Ray Thornton and Ovie Ogofu and even Ben Davis to a certain extent. Now, the Devin Richardson miss has been a big one because he just hasn't played at all. But those, look, those guys, they needed those guys. Like, it's clear that I don't think they were wrong to go after the position that they did in the fashion that they did. They probably should have saved a few more scholarships in recruiting. And Sark didn't take many guys, but they needed a few offensive linemen, because they didn't need to get guys. Look, if you can get somebody who's better than Christian Jones, great, right? Obviously, you take him. They needed guys that were better than Tope Amade, because you're going to need 6 or 7 offensive linemen during the course of a season. We looked at their starters and said, we don't know how good those guys are, but boy, don't have an injury, because there's not even a clear idea of who the 6th guy is. Yes. And to not bring anybody in, put them into a position this year where they're having to start Tope Amade as a starter up front on the offensive line. And I thought it was interesting when Sarkisian was asked about Amade, who we all like, right?
Nice guy. Really nice guy.
Yes.
Great young man. Great young man.
I've never heard anybody say a bad word about him. It's quite the opposite, actually. Yeah. You hear Tope Amade talked about as like a good thing in the Texas program, because he's a good dude. And in the locker room, he's a good dude. He tries hard. He's a good practice player. He's a high effort guy. And when Sarkisian was asked about him on Monday in the press conference, he didn't say he played well and we want him to develop from that. He was more like, we got to get him comfortable. So that's code. There's code. It's not what you say sometimes. It's what you don't say. Correct. When you asked him about Casey Thompson, he was like, well, that's my guy because he's done it in games now. I'm like, I trust him. He can't do that with the offensive linemen this season that he's counting on, but they controlled some of that. The thing is, it wasn't like you and I didn't do videos where we talked about it. It wasn't like I didn't have a top 10 list of available offensive linemen in the portal the entire offseason. We were talking about all of them.
Yeah. You had a pin thread throughout the offseason of guys who were available.
And almost every team in the Big 12, including Oklahoma, and this hasn't worked out great for them, but partly because the guy they got from Tennessee that was expected to start at left tackle has been replaced by a guy who's better than him. I mean, if you got that in the program, fantastic. But Oklahoma went after 2 offensive linemen in the portal, and the other guy was a total depth guy. But you know what? Depth up front is needed when you don't have any at all. What do we give the offensive line and run blocking? Because we have to finish this.
Okay, so I probably give him a B+. I won't give him an A because I got it. The Bijan factor is hard to ignore, right? I mean, he's a 5-star for a reason. So I got to give him a B+ for just the ability to create those holes. And they were able, for the most part, for the most part, throughout the season, I think they've been pretty good, but there definitely have been some times that they're not. I'm saying B plus, maybe it's more of a B if I think about it a little bit more, because, but overall, somewhere between a B and B plus, somewhere in between there.
They're the number one rushing offense in the Big 12. The stats say they should be an A. Our eyeballs said they couldn't block against Arkansas in the run game. They couldn't block against Oklahoma in the second half in the run game. And they couldn't block against Oklahoma State in the run game in the second half either. Again, in all three losses that the Longhorns have this season, the team's inability to run the ball when they couldn't run the ball at all against Arkansas, but they weren't able to put together 2 full 4 quarters of being able to run the football, not even close in those other 2 games. I'll give them a B plus because of the stats. And, you know, it's not like they weren't getting 100 yards plus. It was just really about sections of games that they didn't perform well enough. So now if we both go B plus, and then we've got a D or a C minus. Are we talking C plus? Or are we talking C for the
I think we
group
gotta
as a
go
whole?
C. I think C plus is being too generous.
Is C plus a tip of the cap though to they're the number one rushing team in the Big 12? I'm going to go C plus.
Yeah, but I mean, we also talked about they also have the number one, arguably a Heisman Trophy candidate as well. I mean, you know, it's to be fair, right? I mean, Deontay Foreman rushed for 2,000 yards, and I don't think we look at that offensive line that he ran behind as like, whoa, those were some killers there, right?
Oh man!
I mean, how much was that? How much was that on the offensive line? How much of that was Deontay?
I mean, that's fair. I'm not arguing. I'm not debating you. It feels like it. I don't know if it might be checkmate in the conversation, and I just am looking at the board, not willing to give it up. Okay. It's too good of a point. I'll concede. How about that? You and I rarely do these things where I openly concede a point.
Whoa.
I will absolutely concede you made the point. So we're talking A minus, B plus for the quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
A plus running backs.
Yes.
We went B minus for the receivers.
B minus for the receivers.
And then we had different grades on the tight ends because I gave them a B minus.
Yes, and
because of their, and you were, I gave them a 12 personnel upgrade. And then the offensive line, you and I argued for 5 minutes between C plus and C. Oh, because that's how we do it. But in the end, I conceded to Anwar, which feels really, it's good to have enough self-awareness to know your weaknesses. And like as soon as I conceded, I was like, the C word never comes out of my mouth in these conversations. So do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel if for no other reason than I proved another C word capable of conceding an actual point in a conversation, not just with Anwar Richardson. It's not like it's personal.
You must have some of that Rogue product that you've been using this morning, Ketch. That Rogue. You go.
For myself and Anwar Richardson, we'll do the second half of the position gradings with the defense later this week. We'll talk to you soon. Y'all take care of each other. Goodbye.